Hello everyone, and welcome to the ELDT Hazardous Materials Training. My name is Josh Barron, and I'm a certified instructor here at Midwest Truck Driving School in Escanaba, Michigan. And I have been a certified instructor here for about the last 5 years or so, and have taught many students hazardous materials regulations, the rules and the specifics about hazardous materials. And today I look forward to teaching you a thing or two about hazmat. Before we begin, this presentation and this training is really designed to accomplish three things. One of them is to satisfy the ELDT requirements, the entry-level driver training requirements when it comes to the FMCSA about hazardous materials. Two, I want you to be knowledgeable about hazardous materials. I want you to be safe when transporting hazardous materials. And three, I want you to be able to pass that state test when it comes to hazmat at your local DMV. So I want you to be able to do all this stuff. These are the three goals to this presentation. First and foremost, let's get into the hazmat, the H endorsement process. First, you have to have a Class A, Class B, or a Class C CDL or your CLP. You must have a valid DOT physical and a medical card, and must be at least 21 years of age or older. Now, most of you taking this training have had your CDL for a while, or are getting your CDL, or are familiar with the CDL process, so I'm not going to dive into those details a whole lot, but just know when you're driving on the road, the two things that you always got to have on your possession is your driver's license, your CDL, and your medical card. All important things there. Next up, we must not have any felonies on your record. Now, some exceptions apply to that. A lot of felonies are disqualifying factors from getting a hazmat endorsement. If you're unsure, go to your state's CDL manual and see if the felony you have is eligible for a hazmat endorsement. Otherwise, you can go to your CDL help desk and make a call. They can run your driver's license number and see if that is something you can do. Next, you must be able to submit fingerprints and pass a federal background check. Now, this is done in a couple of different ways. A lot of places have Identigo that can do your fingerprints. If you go to tsa.gov, you can find fingerprint locations there as well, or just do a quick Google search. You can find it as well. Some states do require this to be done prior to taking the hazmat test. I've seen this on both sides of things. Some states require you to take the test first and then get your fingerprints done. Other states want you to get your fingerprints done and then go take the hazmat test. Either or, contact your state to figure out what that process looks like for your individual state. And then you have to take an ELDT approved hazmat training course listed on the TPR. That's of course what this is. After this training, and you complete this training, you'll be submitted to the TPR as you've completed the hazmat endorsement ELDT training. And then after that, you can go to your state's DMV and take that hazmat test, and hopefully you'll pass that hazmat test, and then you'll have that hazmat endorsement on your license. So let's go and dive into some of this material here. Some definitions to get us started. Hazardous materials is a substance determined by the Secretary of Transportation to be capable of posing unreasonable risk to health, safety, and property when transported in commerce. Now this goes specifically into the Hazardous Materials Regulations, HMR 49 CFR, which is your Code of Federal Regulations, parts 171 through 180. Now we're going to be covering quite a bit of those regulations as we go throughout this training here today. But it's just a good brief overview of some of this stuff. Baffle is a divider or wall inside a tanker that moderates the movement from liquid surging. A lot of hazmat gets delivered via cargo tanks from propane to LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, to diesel fuel, to gasoline, all sorts of things. Those baffles inside that tanker kind of limit that movement of liquid back and forth in that tanker. Next, you have a division, which is a subdivision of a hazard class. When I think of like class 1 explosives, you have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Those 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 are different divisions of that hazard class. And then lastly there you have a label. It's a 4x4 diamond identification affixed to packings of hazmat that represent the contents within through the use of specific colors and symbols. If you're hauling hazmat, whatever you're hauling, there has to be a label on the actual packages of hazmat. We'll talk about that more later on. ORMD is other regulated materials for domestic transport only. These include aerosols, perfumes, small arms ammunition, lighters, and cleaning products. We'll talk about that more because these are very common loads as well. When you think about Walgreens loads, Walmart loads, these are common to haul lighters, cleaning products, bleach, hairspray, all those different things are included in ORMD. Next, you have packing group is a grouping according to the degree of danger presented by hazardous materials. Packing group 1 indicates great danger, packing group 2 is medium danger, and packing group 3 is minor danger. Now, this is listed on the hazardous materials table for each product. We'll talk about this more too, but if you have a class that has packing groups and it's packing group 1, well, that's going to indicate that that is great danger. We'll talk about that more. Placard is a 10 by 10 diamond identification that represents the contents within through the use of different colors and symbols. Primary hazard is the hazard class of a material as assigned in the hazmat table. Subsidiary hazard is a materials hazard other than the primary hazard and less of a danger than the primary hazard. So the primary hazard is going to be the big one. After that, you have the subsidiary hazard. And then you have outage. Outage is the allowance for expansion of liquid from temperature changes. Now, everything has a degree of outage. I think of propane because it has a ton of outage. Propane boils at negative 44 degrees, which is why when you get your propane tanks filled, you really can't fill them more than 80-85%. Why? Because you're saving 15 to 20% for outage, for that propane to expand in that tanker as the weather gets warm. And then surge, or more commonly known as slosh, you might have heard the term slosh, is the movement of liquid in partially filled tanks. That's the whole point of baffles, to kind of limit surge and minimize surge. Rules and regulations. Drivers of hazmat must be trained and retested every 3 years. This is important. Now, typically your hazmat endorsement renews every 4 to 5 years, but you need to be trained and retested every 3 years. This is typically done by your employer in regards to hazmat because every employer is a little bit different. Every carrier is a little bit different, and there is a million different types of hazmat that could be carried out there. And so a lot of times this training is specifically directed towards the kind of hazmat that you will be transporting. And then also note, drivers transporting radioactive materials must have had special training within the past 2 years. So radioactive material, a little bit more strict, have to have training every 2 years. Everyone else every 3 years. And remember that hazmat endorsement renews every 4 to 5 years. When it does renew, it is one of those tests that does require you to retake the hazmat test at the DMV, and typically you have to get your fingerprints done all over again as well. Just an FYI on that. Here there are 3 lists that you can use to find out if material is a regulated product. First, you have the hazardous materials table, which is 49 CFR 172.101. And the hazardous materials table is 8 columns, and it lists over 3,000 different hazardous materials. And that is the current list, and that is how many different kind of materials and items that they've identified to be hazardous materials. Really important to know that table, be familiar with that table. We'll talk about that more in the presentation. 2, Appendix A to that section, known as the list of hazardous substances and reportable quantities. And 3 is Appendix B to that section, known as the list of marine pollutants. Rules and regulations. The intent of hazardous materials regulations is to ensure safety, to contain the material, and to communicate the risk. Containment rules specify how to package, load, transport, and unload hazardous materials safely. So this is the whole point of the rules and regulations, that from start to finish, hazardous materials are packaged properly, they're loaded properly, they're transported properly, and they're unloaded properly and safely. We'll talk about each one of those things as it applies to us as professional drivers. Hazmat classes and divisions. So first, there are 9 classes of hazmat materials with some broken down into divisions. You can see class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We're going to dive into each one of these classes here momentarily. This is just a good introduction. Flammable and non-flammable gases are included in class 2 hazmat, so things like helium, oxygen, and propane. And class 3 hazmat materials include flammable liquids such as gasoline, acetone, and methanol. The technical name is the name of a hazmat material used in scientific journals and texts, recognized as its chemical or microbiological name. So that's kind of a lot of fancy terminology to say that some things we know as generic terms or slang terms. And I think of ammonium nitrate is very common. It's a class 5 hazmat material, but we know it as fertilizer. That would be the generic name, the slang name. But the technical name or the microbiological name is going to be ammonium nitrate, a class 5 hazardous material. Next, we have poisons and infectious substances are included in hazard class 6. And battery acid, sulfuric acid, and lead acid batteries, car batteries, is considered a class 8 corrosive. So very common, a lot of batteries get transported all over the place. Batteries have a life expectancy, and batteries are really common. You see corrosive quite often in dry van trailers transporting across the United States. So let's dive into these classes. Class 1 is explosives. Class 1 is broken down into these different divisions here. So we'll start with division 1.1, which is considered a mass explosive hazard. And that's going to be essentially bombs and different things like black powder, dynamite, C4, things that have a mass explosive hazard. 1.2 is projection hazard. And so these are going to be certain fireworks, detonating fuses. I think of like the big display fireworks that you see on the 4th of July. That's going to be included in 1.2. 1.3 is mass fire hazard. So think of sodium picromate, some liquid, solid propellants is considered a mass fire hazard. A 1.4 is a minor explosion hazard. So that'd be your typical common fireworks. Think of like snakes and sparklers. Small arms ammunition. 1.5, very insensitive explosives, type E blasting agents. And 1.6 is extremely insensitive explosives, specifically detonating substances. Class 2 is where your gases fall. 2.1 is flammable gases. Propane, which is a type of LPG, which is liquefied petroleum gas. Spray paint as well is listed under 2.1. 2.2 is non-flammable gases, things like helium, asthma inhalers, albuterol, considered a 2.2 hazmat. And 2.3 are poisonous or toxic substances. Things like carbon monoxide, chlorine, these are very, very dangerous substances, and there's specific regulations that you have to know in regards to some of these types of very dangerous hazardous materials. We'll talk about those a little bit more later. Class 3 is flammable liquids. This class includes materials whose flash point is not more than 141 degrees Fahrenheit. A flash point is the lowest temperature that a liquid can start giving off vapor that can be ignited into the air. Gasoline has a flash point of approximately negative 40 degrees. This means at this temperature and higher, the vapors that come from it can be ignited. Antifreeze has a flash point of 232 degrees. You see a lot of these placards all over the place. Typically, they are some type of gasoline, could be kerosene, diesel fuel, all considered flammable liquids. Class 4 is flammable solids. 4.1, flammable solid, nitrocellulose, magnesium, considered flammable solids. If you've ever played with flint, you know magnesium is extremely flammable. 4.2, spontaneously combustible material, is self-heating substances. And 4.3, dangerous one, wet, includes sodium, calcium carbide, amongst other materials there as well. Class 5 is oxidizing substances and organic peroxides. 5.1 is considered an oxidizer, a substance that may cause or enhance the combustion of another material since it yields oxygen. These include ammonium nitrate, which we talked about being fertilizer, and some pool chemicals like sodium hypochlorite. 5.2 is organic peroxides. These are considered derivatives of hydrogen peroxide where one or both hydrogen atoms have been replaced by organic radicals. These are thermally unstable and are liable to explosive decomposition and burn rapidly. They are also sensitive to impact or friction. We'll talk about those more later as well.